There's something about a roadside motel that no architect ever intended to build into the design. It's not the flickering vacancy sign. It's not the parking lot that's always half empty no matter what time you arrive. It's not even the ice machine at the end of the hall that sounds like something is trapped inside it. It's the feeling, that specific, skin-crawling feeling that you are somewhere between places. Somewhere that exists outside of normal life. A place where the rules of the world you came from don't quite apply yet, and the rules of wherever you're going haven't started either. Liminal. That's the word for it. And the people who work those front desks, the ones who hand you your key card at 2 a.m., who hear every door that opens and closes, who see every face that comes through that lobby. They know something that the rest of us don't. They know what actually happens at roadside motels on empty highways. And tonight, 5 of them are going to tell you. My name is Carla, and I worked the night desk at a motel called the Starlight Inn for almost 3 years. Now before you picture some glamorous boutique hotel with mood lighting and a trendy cocktail bar. Let me correct that image immediately. The Starlight Inn sat on a stretch of Route 9 in central Missouri that made you feel like civilization had quietly given up on the area sometime around 1987 and never came back. The nearest gas station was 11 miles east. The nearest town was 14 miles west. And in between it was just flat dark road, flat dark fields, and us. We had 22 rooms arranged in a U shape around a cracked asphalt parking lot. Room 1 through 11 on the left wing, room 12 through 22 on the right. The office was at the center where the U opened up, and that's where I spent most of my nights, behind a bulletproof partition that the previous owner had installed sometime in the 90s for reasons I chose not to ask about. The job itself was exactly as exciting as you'd expect. Check people in, hand out extra towels, field the occasional noise complaint, watch the parking lot on a camera system so old the footage looked like it had been filmed through a jar of Vaseline. Eat whatever I brought from home because the vending machine in the lobby ate dollar bills like it had a grudge. Most nights, nothing happened, but room 11 was different. I noticed it about 4 months into the job. Room 11 had a higher turnover than any other room in the motel. Now that sounds like a good thing for business, but it wasn't a steady stream of happy travelers that kept that room occupied. It was the complaints. Nobody ever stayed more than one night in room 11. And when they checked out, always early, always before I'd expect them, they'd stop at my window and say something. Not always the same thing, but always something. One woman, mid-40s, sensible looking, the kind of person who irons her travel clothes, stopped at my window at 4 a.m. and told me very quietly that she'd heard someone walking on the roof above her room all night long. She said it wasn't animals. She said the footsteps had weight to them. Human weight. A trucker who'd stayed in room 11 told me the TV turned itself on 3 times during the night. Always to the same channel. Static. And that each time it turned on, he'd find the bathroom door open even though he'd closed it. A young couple, college kids, road tripping. Checked in on a Friday and were at my window by 2 a.m. asking for a different room. I asked what was wrong. The girl wouldn't look at me. The boys said they'd woken up to what sounded like someone knocking on the inside of the closet door. Slow, steady knocking. I gave them a different room. I always gave them a different room when they asked. Well, I never told any of them was this. I heard it too. Not every night. Maybe once or twice a month. I'd be sitting at my desk at some dead hour between 2 and 4 a.m. and I'd hear it. Walking. Slow and deliberate. From the direction of room 11. Down the covered walkway. Past room 10. Past 9. Past 8. Coming toward the office. And then it would stop. Every time it would stop. I told my manager about it once. He was a heavy-set man named Gerald who drove out from Jefferson City every Monday morning to check the books and drove back by noon. Gerald had the energy of a man who had stopped being curious about anything sometime in his mid-30s. He told me it was probably a raccoon on the roof and suggested I lay off the late-night coffee. So I stopped telling Gerald, but I started keeping a log. Every time I heard it, I wrote down the date, the time, whether room 11 was occupied, and whether the adjacent rooms were occupied. I did this for about 7 months, and I found a pattern. The walking only happened when room 11 was empty. Every single time I logged it, 31 entries over 7 months. Room 11 had no registered guest. The moment someone checked into that room, the walking stopped. I've thought about what that means for a long time, and I've never arrived at an explanation that I'm comfortable with. The most logical thing I can tell myself is that the sound was structural. Something in the building's framework that only manifested under specific temperature or pressure conditions. That's what I tell myself during the day. At 3 a.m., sitting behind that partition with the parking lot dark and empty and Route 9 stretching off into nothing in both directions, I told myself something different. I told myself that whatever was in room 11 didn't like company, and that when a guest checked in, it didn't leave. It just got quiet. I spent 18 months working at a motel off I-40 in the Texas Panhandle. I won't name it specifically because I'm pretty sure it's still operating and I don't need the legal headache. What I will tell you is that it sat between two exits on that highway that were so far apart that if you missed either one at night, you were looking at a 40-minute detour to get back. People didn't choose our motel. They ended up there, and most of them, you could tell, they'd pull in with that particular exhausted relief of someone who has given up fighting the distance and just needs a flat surface to sleep on. They'd barely make eye contact during check-in. They were in their rooms within 5 minutes, gone before sunrise. But every Thursday night, without fail, she arrived. I noticed her on my third week. She pulled up in a copper-colored Buick that looked like it hadn't been washed since the Clinton administration. She was a small woman, maybe late 60s, white hair cut close to her head, wearing the same beige cardigan every single time. She'd walk to the window, slide her card under the partition without being asked, and say the same thing. Room 7, please, if it's available. Room 7 was always available. I started holding it for her after the 4th week, though she never asked me to. She'd take the key, walk to room 7, go inside, and I wouldn't see her again until 6 a.m. Friday morning when she'd return the key. No small talk, no requests, no noise complaints from neighbors. She'd push the key back under the window, say thank you, dear, get in the Buick, and drive west. Always west. I watched. Now, I'm a curious person by nature. Pathologically curious, my mother would say. So after about 2 months of this, I started wondering about her. Who was she? Where did she come from each Thursday? Where did she go each Friday morning? What was in room 7 that kept bringing her back? I tried asking once. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I asked her if she was passing through or if she had family in the area. She looked at me for a long moment with these very pale blue eyes and said, I'm visiting someone. I said, oh, do they live nearby? And she said, not anymore. And that was the end of that conversation. It was my colleague Darnell who finally told me. Darnell had worked at that motel for 6 years before I arrived and knew everything about everything that happened on that stretch of I-40. He told me over a cup of terrible vending machine coffee one quiet Wednesday night. He told me that about 4 years before I started, a man had died in room 7. Natural causes. Heart attack in his sleep. He'd been a long-haul trucker, mid-60s, who'd been making the same route along I-40 for over 20 years. He stopped at our motel every Thursday night. Always room 7. His wife, small woman, white hair, beige cardigan, had identified the body, and she'd been coming back every Thursday night since. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me found it unbearably sad. Part of me found it something else. Something I couldn't name. Because room 7 was a motel room. A beige, laminate-floored, humming air conditioning unit of a room with a painting of a desert sunset bolted above the bed. It wasn't a grave. It wasn't a memorial. But for her it was. The last Thursday, she came, and I know it was the last Thursday because I never saw her again after that. She paused at the window after sliding her card under and said something she'd never said before. She said, he's not there anymore, you know. I knew at the moment I walked in tonight. Something's different. I think he's finally gone on. She didn't look sad when she said it. She looked relieved. She returned the key at 6 a.m., as always, said thank you, and drove west. And I never held room 7 for anyone again. This is the story I've never told anyone in full. Not because I'm afraid people won't believe me. I passed that point a long time ago. I'm telling it now because I'm 43 years old and I still think about it at least once a week, and I've come to believe that the only way to stop carrying something is to put it down. So here it is. I work nights at a motel called the Pineview Lodge off Highway 2 in northern Montana. I was 26 at the time. It was the kind of place where winter started in October and didn't apologize until May. We were the last motel for 60 miles in either direction on that highway, and in deep winter, with the passes getting dangerous after dark, we'd fill up fast with stranded travelers who'd underestimated the conditions. It was February, a bad February even by Montana standards. A blizzard had been coming down since early afternoon, and by 9 p.m. the Highway Patrol had strongly advised against travel on that stretch of Highway 2. We were full, every room occupied. I had a waiting list, which almost never happened, for anyone who showed up needing a room. At 11:17 p.m., a man came through the front door. I know the exact time because I wrote it down later when I was trying to make sense of everything. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a heavy canvas jacket caked with snow. Dark hair, maybe late 30s. He had a small duffel bag over one shoulder. He came to the desk and asked if we had any vacancy. I told him we were full. He asked if I had a waiting list. I told him yes and offered to add his name. He gave me his name, David Marsh, and his license plate number, which is standard procedure so we can find someone in the parking lot if a room opens up. I wrote it down. He said he'd wait in his truck, and I told him I could find him if anything opened up. And then he went back out into the blizzard. At 1:44 a.m., David Marsh came back to the front door. I know this because I looked up from the desk when I heard the door, and I recognized him immediately. Same jacket, same duffel bag. I started to tell him I still didn't have a room when he spoke first. He said, "I've been waiting out there since around midnight. Any chance something's opened up?" I told him I didn't have anything yet. He nodded, said he understood, and asked if there was anywhere he could get warm for a few minutes. I told him the lobby was fine. He sat in one of the 2 chairs we had near the window, put his duffel on his lap, and stared out at the parking lot. At 2:10 a.m., a family in room 14 called the desk. A pipe had burst in their bathroom. I needed to move them, and they needed a refund, and the whole thing was a logistical headache that had me on the phone with the emergency maintenance line for the better part of 20 minutes. When I got off the phone and looked up, David Marsh was gone from the lobby chair. I figured he'd gone back to his truck. I wrote room 14 as available, noted the maintenance issue, and went back to managing the night. At 2:55 a.m., David Marsh walked through the front door, and I felt something drop in my stomach that I couldn't explain. He came up to the desk and told me he'd been sitting in his truck and was wondering if anything had opened up yet. I stared at him. I told him I thought he'd already come back inside around 1:44 a.m. He looked at me with what I can only describe as genuine confusion and told me that no, he'd been in his truck the whole time, since 11:30 p.m. when I'd added him to the waiting list. He had not come inside at 1:44 a.m. He had not sat in the lobby chair. He had not stared out at the parking lot for 26 minutes. I looked at the chair by the window. It was angled slightly inward, the way someone shifts furniture when they sit in it. And the seat cushion, this thin, vinyl-covered square, had a wet outline on it, the shape of someone who'd come in from a blizzard and sat down. I gave David Marsh room 14. I told him about the pipe issue and gave him a discount. He thanked me, took his key, and headed out. I sat back down at the desk and looked at the chair. I've come up with a lot of explanations over the years. Shift fatigue, low light confusion, that I'd seen a different man with a similar jacket, and convinced myself it was the same person. These are all reasonable explanations. I've tried each one on and worn it for a while, and then taken it off again, because none of them account for the wet outline on that chair cushion. Someone sat in that chair. Someone came in from the blizzard, waited for 26 minutes, and left. And it wasn't David Marsh. I want to start by saying that I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I grew up on a farm in rural Kentucky, the third of 5 kids, in a house where the electricity went out in bad storms, and you just lit a candle and got on with it. I've dealt with things that would make most city people check into therapy. So when I tell you that what I found on my first week at the Blue Ridge Motor Court made me consider quitting on the spot, I want you to understand that it was significant. I wasn't a front desk worker. I was a housekeeper, day shift, which meant I arrived at 7 a.m. and worked through checkout rooms until about 3 p.m. It was hard physical work, but straightforward. Strip the beds, wipe down the bathroom, restock the toiletries, vacuum, done. Next room. The Blue Ridge Motor Court sat on a mountain highway in Western Virginia that curved so sharply in places that the 18-wheelers had to take it in 2 moves. It was beautiful in daylight. In the fog, which sat on that mountain most mornings until nearly noon, it was something else. On my 4th day, I was assigned to clean room 9. The guest had checked out at the standard time. The room looked undisturbed at first glance. Bed messed, but not destroyed. Bathroom used. Standard solo traveler mess. I started with the bed, stripping the sheets, and that's when I found the first one. A photograph, slipped under the fitted sheet, face down against the mattress. I flipped it over. It was a picture of the parking lot, taken from inside the room, from the window, time-stamped in the corner in the way old digital cameras used to do. 3:14 a.m. The parking lot was empty in the photo. Just the yellow glow of the single parking lot light, the dark asphalt, the tree line beyond the guardrail at the edge of the mountain road. Except for one thing. In the far left corner of the parking lot, at the very edge of the light's reach, there was a figure, just standing there, facing the room. I set the photo on the bedside table and finished stripping the bed. And I found another one. Same type of photo. Same timestamp style. This one said 3:31 a.m. It was the same angle, the same window shot of the parking lot. The figure was closer. I found 7 photographs in that room. Under the sheets. Under the mattress. Behind the bathroom mirror, tucked into the gap between the glass and the frame. One folded inside the empty tissue box. 7 photos, all taken from room 9's window, spanning from 3:14 a.m. to 4:02 a.m. by the timestamps. And in every single one, the figure was closer than in the last. In the final photograph, the figure was at the window, looking in. You couldn't make out a face. The image quality was poor, and the light was behind the figure, not on it. Just a silhouette pressed up close to the glass. Close enough that you could see it was a person. Close enough to see the hands pressed flat against the window on either side of where the face would be. I took the photographs to my supervisor, a woman named Brenda, who had been at that motel for 11 years and had the permanent expression of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything. She looked at the photos for a long time. Then she looked at me. Then she said, "Which room?" I said room 9. She nodded slowly and told me to put the photos in the lost and found box in the supply closet and to finish my rounds. I asked her if I should call the police. She said, "Who would you report?" "A shadow in a parking lot." She wasn't wrong. I put them in the lost and found box and finished my rounds. But at the end of my shift, I went back to the supply closet. The photographs were gone. Brenda was gone too. Left early, the front desk girl told me. Didn't say why. I finished out the week and then I quit. I told myself it was because the drive was too far, which was also true. But the real reason was that on my last morning there, I was cleaning room 8, the room directly next to room 9. And when I wiped down the window from the inside, I noticed something on the glass. 2 faint impressions, side by side, the shape of hands pressed flat against the outside of the glass. I need to tell you up front that I've gone back and forth about whether to share this. Not because I'm worried about my own privacy. I'm using a different name, and I've changed enough details that nobody who knew me then would recognize the specifics. I've gone back and forth because this story doesn't end the way scary stories are supposed to end. There's no resolution. There's no explanation. There's just what happened, and then the years of silence after it. And me, finally, deciding that the silence has gone on long enough. My name for the purposes of this story is Marcus. And for 11 months, I worked the overnight desk at a motel on Highway 50 in Nevada, a stretch of road officially designated as a lonesome highway by the state, which is the government's polite way of telling you that if something goes wrong out there, you are probably on your own. It was as remote gets. Nearest neighbor was a gas station 12 miles east that closed at 9 p.m. We had 16 rooms, a vending machine, a satellite TV, and a lobby that got 4 channels, and a view of the kind of flat, dark Nevada, nothing that makes you understand why people have always associated deserts with the supernatural. We averaged maybe 6 or 7 occupied rooms on a typical night. Less in winter. It was November, about 4 months into the job. I'd gotten comfortable with the rhythm of it, the nothing of it. I'd started bringing books. Real ones, thick ones, the kind that take weeks to finish. I was halfway through one on a Tuesday night when the door opened at 2:38 a.m. She was young, maybe 20, 21 at the most. She was wearing a light jacket that was completely wrong for November in the Nevada desert where the temperature drops faster and harder than most people expect. Her hair was damp. Not from rain, there was no rain, and she looked pale in a way that went beyond cold. She looked pale in the way that people look when something has happened to them, when they're still inside it. She came to the desk, and asked for a room. I asked for her ID and a card. She fumbled in her jacket pocket for a long time and produced a driver's license. Nevada ID. I don't remember the name. I've tried, but I remember her face in that photo. She looked different, healthier, brighter. The girl in the photo looked like she was doing fine. She didn't have a card. She had cash. We accepted cash. I took it, made the key, slid under the partition. Room 6, close to the office. I don't know why I gave her the closest room. Something made me. She took the key and then stood at the window for a moment. Not moving, just standing. I asked if she was all right. She said, "Can I ask you something weird?" I said, "Sure." She said, "If someone comes asking for me tonight, can you tell them I'm not here?" I looked at her. I asked if she was in some kind of trouble. She thought about it for a second. Actually seemed to think about it, like she was weighing the honest answer. And then she said, "I'm not sure yet." I told her I'd keep an eye out. She nodded and walked to room 6 and went inside, and I watched the light come on under the door, and then I sat back down with my book and I watched the parking lot. For 2 hours, nothing happened. At 4:51 a.m., a car turned off the highway into our lot. It was a dark-colored sedan. No plates visible on the front. It pulled in slowly, the way cars do when they're looking for something rather than arriving somewhere. It went around the U of the parking lot once. Headlights sweeping slowly across the room doors. And then it stopped, right in front of room 6. It sat there for 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. I had my hand on the phone the whole time, trying to decide what I was calling about. A car parked in a motel parking lot wasn't a crime. People pull into motel lots all the time to check their phone or look at a map or eat something. I waited. At the 4-minute mark, the car moved. It pulled forward, swung around, and left the lot. Turned west onto the highway. I went to the window and watched the tail lights disappear. Then I picked up the phone and dialed room 6. It rang 8 times. Nobody answered. I waited 5 minutes and dialed again. 8 rings. Nothing. I went to room 6. Knocked. Nothing. Knocked harder. Nothing. I used my master key. The room was empty. Bed hadn't been touched. Jacket folded on the chair. The window facing the parking lot was open. The screen had been removed from inside and was leaning against the wall below it. She'd gone out the window. I don't know when. Before the car arrived or after she heard it pull in. I don't know which. I called the highway patrol. Reported the situation. They came out, took the information, took the cash she paid with, took the license plate number I gave them from the check-in record. I never heard back from them. Not once. I've thought about her a lot over the years. About the pale face and the damp hair and the jacket too thin for November. About whoever was in that dark sedan that circled the lot and stopped in front of her door. About whether she'd seen the headlights under the curtain and gone out the window before they could knock. I hope she went out before. I've decided I believe she went out before. I worked at that motel for another 7 months after that night. During that entire time, I never gave anyone room 6 without first making sure they had somewhere to be in the morning. And every Tuesday night, because it was a Tuesday when she came in, I watched the lot a little harder than usual, just in case she came back. She never did, and I don't know if that's the good ending or the bad one. 5 people, 5 highways, 5 nights that none of them have ever been able to fully leave behind. There's something that connects every one of these stories, and it's not the darkness or the isolation or the things that move through the night when they shouldn't have been moving. It's the desk, the partition, the window between the person who works there and the world that passes through. Night after night, these people sat on one side of that glass and watched. And sometimes what they watched them back. Next time you pull into a roadside motel at 2 a.m., hand over your card and walk to your room along that covered walkway. Take a second to look back at the office window. The person behind that desk has been there since before you arrived, and they've seen things. They've seen things they've never told anyone. Until now.